whenever we kind of meet with our awardees, even before we grant them the scholarship, one thing we say to our awardees that this is a journey. Seeking knowledge is a journey, and therefore don't worry about how long it takes, rather worry about reaching the destination. And I also say that it is all about us being part of their journey. And sometimes actually we take the credit, gift of knowledge, we take credit because they have done a lot of hard work, over the years. They've gone through the sort of their education journey, and they're at a good kind of position. So we take the advantage of being part of their journey at the end of their journey, and we take the credit in a positive way, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu wa alaikum assalam. Afwan.
That's okay. Welcome, Ustaza Shahnaz. Thank you for joining us. I don't know whether you managed to listen to my last point that we kind of in a positive way we take the credit of you guys. You do all the hard work. And we come at the forefront and we take the credit. Did you hear my point?
I did. Alhamdulillah. Well, alhamdulillah, I think you definitely deserve some credit. Institutions like this, kind of projects like the one that you're talking about tonight, really make, the furthering of Islamic education possible, and our kind of place and role in society possible. I think without the kind of support that the gift of knowledge gives to students like myself, it just wouldn't be possible. Furthering that journey just wouldn't be possible. So I think you definitely deserve some credit.
Hey, so very briefly, I was saying that in order for us to guide the community and help the community, we need qualified scholars. And in order to produce qualified, competent scholars, this is where they need some support, and this is where hopefully would like to think that gift of knowledge sort of is trying to offer some service. Secondly, I mentioned that within the Muslim community, we are used to preaching, listening to nasiha, talks, whereas in this mainstream society, they don't like preaching. They don't like sort of talks, they rather prefer research-based approach. And this is where we are bringing in the PhD scholarship, that this is where we would like to think that if we can help our brothers and sisters to acquire the research skills at a kind of PhD level, then inshallah they can get to policy making position with Islamic guidance, and this is where we can actually benefit the wider community. And this is why our second priority is to kind of support PhD students like yourself. Now, what are you doing now in terms of your studies? Give us some sort of brief overview of your studies, inshallah.
Just to say, I completely agree with what you've said, and I think that the point was also made earlier that there's a whole other conversation going on about Islam and the Muslim community that Muslims aren't really a part of, and because we don't engage in those mechanisms, and we're kind of stuck in our silos. So I think it is important to widen that conversation and to learn how to engage in that conversation, be a part of that conversation, because unfortunately those kinds of conversations is what filters down into society, and it can either make life for the Muslim community here easy or difficult. And so I think it's really important for Muslims to engage in that conversation on a wider level, and be able to have the confidence to do that. So I definitely agree with the points that you've made in terms of my own journey. So it really started with traditional studies, because as you said, I found it really important to. I'd had some engagement with Islamic studies in a kind of academic setting, but as you said, I found it a really important necessity, kind of a necessity to have that traditional grounding and that traditional background. So I did attend a kind of semi-traditional seminary based in London, where I studied the Alamiya program for 6 years and kind of got my grounding in the Islamic sciences and in Arabic, and then decided to go on into academia. And so I did my master's in Islamic studies at SOAS in London, and currently I'm doing my PhD at Exeter University and Institute of Arab and Islamic Studies, looking particularly at Islamic law and legal theory. So that's kind of been my journey so far. But as you said, I think it was really important for me to have that grounding in the traditional sciences in order to be able to grapple with that conversation that's happening outside of our community better and kind of stay rooted within our tradition but still be able to have those wider conversations as well. I think that's only enhanced and enriched my ability to have those conversations with more productivity, really.
And any particular reason why you have chosen this topic? I know you have some sort of your undergraduate degree was on law, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah. So, I mean, before I went into my traditional studies, I did do an undergraduate in law, and I worked in public policy and strategy for a long time as well. Before deciding to kind of take a bit of a shift in my kind of interest. So yeah, I mean, I've had an interest in the law for a very long time. And so when I kind of started studying Islamic law as a traditional science, that kind of piqued my interest particularly. And obviously, because law is so, kind of integral to our everyday life, Muslims kind of grapple with Islamic law on a daily basis. And so, it kind of, stuck out for me as an important subject, and one that I'd kind of wanted to further my studies in.
Anything interesting recently you covered or you're reading in relation to your PhD topic that you can share with us?
Well, I'm particularly looking at Hanafi law and looking at early Hanafi texts. So, the founders of the school of the Hanafi school of law left behind a lot of literature. And as kind of traditional students, we don't always go back to that literature because obviously it's developed over time, and it's become much more sophisticated, and there are easier ways to kind of sometimes access those texts. But part of my interest was looking at those original texts and looking at how they dealt with the Quran and the Sunnah. And it was just it's been really interesting to kind of uncover some of those texts and to look at how kind of Western academia has also looked at this topic and looked at the importance of language, within the Muslim legal tradition. So yeah, I mean, there's not a particular thing that's coming to my mind at the moment, but it's all quite interesting and quite fascinating. And that early period especially is fascinating. It worked in a very different way, and so just unpacking all of that has been quite exciting for me.
Any particular challenges from an academic perspective? Any particular challenges you're facing now at this stage of your research?
I mean, it's part of the biggest. I think that maybe part of the difficulty of engaging in academia at this level is always kind of trying to get your head around how to frame arguments and how to kind of engage in the discussion. So a point that was made earlier is that there are a lot of Orientalist, kind of type of, Orientalist thinking that kind of intertwined and that is woven into the discussions around Islam in this kind of context, and trying to kind of grapple with that in a way that's still credible within academia, but still kind of rooted in the tradition is always a challenge, and I think that can always be a difficult balance. So just trying to sort of think about how to frame arguments. Excuse me. Think about how to frame arguments and thinking about how to talk about the tradition in a way that fits into the context that I'm in at the moment. That's always a challenge. And obviously, practically speaking, I mean, we're in, we've been in COVID lockdown for a long time, so PhDs are quite lonely businesses. So obviously, lockdown has made that extra difficult. Not being able to see people and not being able to engage with the university as much as possible. But I've got an excellent supervisor who's not Muslim, and a lot of you'll find a lot of Muslims are quite surprised by this, and I know my own family was that. a lot of the biggest names in Islamic studies in this country and in the West, the biggest people that hold the biggest positions within universities are generally non-Muslims. And so, that kind of gives you an insight into that world a little bit. So, that's, but I mean, I've got a great supervisor. He's very supportive. So yeah, it's been interesting.
And just from a different angle, from a spiritual angle, how do you see this? Let's say, of course, when we see supervisor, they are our teachers.
Yeah, yeah.
They are guiding us, teaching us. How do you, again, it's not about right, wrong answer, just a kind of a reflection. How do you see this whole thing that you are a student and let's say the supervisor is a teacher, that Allah has blessed you with the guidance, but the teacher who is teaching you may not have been blessed with that guidance, but yet well grounded.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's an interesting contradiction, definitely. It's amazing it always fascinates me, and it kind of blows me away how much these academics know about Islam and the depth to which they've studied the deen, and the way that they can talk about it. But they obviously, hidayah is with Allah. And it does fascinate me, kind of being in these discussions with not just Muslims but non-Muslims as well, and having really in-depth discussions, being able to kind of use Arabic terminology and use terminology that's quite common in our tradition, but not be doing that with a Muslim, as you're aware. But it's I think that's part of how we learn to engage as well. The society that we live in, we are a minority, and we are constantly living out Islam and discussing Islam in a non-Muslim context. And it it's a really interesting dynamic to try and grapple with that. So it's a learning experience as well as as well as one that is quite fascinating to think about, in terms of where those blessings are given, really.
My intention isn't that you become disrespectful to your non-Muslim teacher. Subhanallah, إنك لا تهدي من أحببت ولكن الله يهدي من يشاء. Hidayah comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this should actually this should humble us, and make us appreciate more our limitation, that you can be very intellectual and very academically bright, but guidance is a completely different ball game. It comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we have been chosen and given this guidance despite having, let's say, in comparison with the supervisors and the lecturers and the teachers, possibly less knowledge, but yet Allah has enlightened us and Allah has given us this guidance, without us deserving or being entitled to. And again, we have no control over that. Today we have this blessing, tomorrow we may not have, if we become undeserving again, if we become arrogant, in our life. It does. I remember when I was at university, I used to get stuck with that they've got so much knowledge, but yet they can't guide me to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yes,
They're teaching me, but they can't really teach me to the real destination.
Yeah, and I think it kind of comes back to keeping yourself rooted within the tradition as well. I've not lost contact with any of my traditional teachers, and obviously being connected with the gift of knowledge as well kind of helps me to do that, as well. So I think it's always important that when you're venturing out into these things, that you have some connection with the community and with the tradition, and that's why it's so important for the community to take responsibility for these kinds of ventures, so that people aren't going into the study of Islam within Western academia without that support network and without that grounding, because it would be a very difficult thing to do without that support.
And inshallah, we also hope that gift of knowledge, inshallah, is sort of making good progress now, and we would like to sort of go to the next level in terms of bringing in more or offering more support, number-wise as well as quality-wise. And I really want to sort of I want gift knowledge to be more part of you guys' sort of journey. It's a two-way thing that we benefit from you, and hopefully you also benefit from us. And would be really nice to sort of in your journey, not just you but also other awardees, that we can in the process of going through the seeking sort of a knowledge journey, that we can also start benefiting the community rather than waiting for the end of the journey to come back and benefit the community. And especially with this nowadays, with the sort of technological support, maybe inshallah we will be able to materialize that, inshallah.
Inshallah.
In terms of, I think probably we had some brief discussion on that point. How do you see the whole concept of transformation? Within the Islamic knowledge, or when you are seeking Islamic knowledge, there is an element of us being transformed. When I say being transformed, not just thinking wise, but also akhlaq, character wise, which maybe you won't be able to expect that in this sort of Western academia and setting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's very different compared to the 6 years that I did in my traditional studies doing the Islamic sciences, compared to the masters and now the PhD. It's a completely different ball game. I mean, there is a sense of that spirituality is missing. The real core of what it means to seek knowledge, to really find truth. This idea of reaching an ultimate truth and working towards that and going on that journey to reach that ultimate truth is really missing in academia. Obviously, there is a sense of the truth and wanting to find good answers and wanting to kind of contribute to the knowledge in the community, but it is very different to my traditional studies. And that's why it's important to have that grounding within traditional studies before you go on to something like this. And that I 100% agree with that connection and with that kind of grounding. But I mean, it is basically a sort of professional training ground, PhD scholarship. So I think, PhDs, and doing a master's is essentially sort of a training ground before you can kind of go into research, into Western academia, and really engage in those discussions. So it has a practical purpose, and I think it is important for people within our community to kind of appreciate how we can use these tools to better engage in the conversation around Islam that is happening outside of our community. But yeah, of course, I mean, it's a very different venture. But again, like I said, you try and keep connections with your, with the people that you sought knowledge with your teachers, with your community, and hopefully that also kind of spiritually nourishes you and keeps you grounded.
I mean, on the 27th night, we had similar program, and we had one of our trustees sort of joined us, and she was saying that she had been to different courses and classes. She's a medical doctor, been to different courses and classes. What was missing, which she didn't kind of figure out that what was missing, and then in her sort of in her own words, that when she came to Beacon Institute, as you know, that we've got Beacon Institute where we teach, with gifted knowledge where we facilitate. So she's also a student of Beacon Institute. That until she came to our classes and courses, she realized that what was missing, and she was saying the missing element was the suhba element, the companionship, and the suhba element Sahaba comes from that suhbah concept, that they were companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They weren't brothers; they were companions. So this is something, yes, Islam puts emphasis on in the learning journey, seeking knowledge journey. The suhbah element is very important, and inshallah, we also want to not bring back, but see how much we can facilitate that, so that there is an ongoing benefit from that. We won't be taking much of your time. Jazakallah, thank you for joining us. And inshallah we will stay in touch. Although we are still in sort of COVID circumstance, but you're nearly finishing this year, isn't it?
Inshallah, a little bit more to go. Yeah.
So inshallah we'll stay in touch, and keep us in your dua, inshallah, and in particular gift of knowledge. Sometimes I feel ashamed that we only make a small contribution, and then we try to say that we are supporting you guys. So
No, honestly, I think as I said, it's PhDs can be lonely ventures, so it's always nice to know that there is support out there, and the conversations that I've had with the gift of knowledge with yourself in the short time that you've been part of my sort of PhD journey has been so kind of helpful, and it's always nice to know that you've got that support and people that you can turn to. So yeah, alhamdulillah.
Okay, then inshallah we'll catch up some other time. Jazakallah, thank you for your time.
Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.